Some friends ask, is the term Usul al Din mentioned in the Qur'an and the prophetic traditions, or was this term coined by scholars? And what is the reason that we refer to some matters as Usul al Din, while others are called Furuʿ al Din? To answer this question, we must first address some important points. Part 1. The meaning of asl and furuʿ from a linguistic and terminological perspective. Linguistically, the word asl in Arabic refers to the root or source upon which everything is built. For example, the asl of a word is its root from which various derivatives and meanings emerge. In the same way, when we say asl al din, we mean the fundamental and essential principles that constitute the basis of the belief. Terminologically, the term Usul al Din is used to denote the primary doctrinal elements upon which every believer must be knowledgeable and assured. In contrast, Furuʿ al Din refers to the practical and legal aspects that regulate the implementation of these beliefs in everyday life. In other words, the creed, the essential beliefs, is the firm and established foundation, while the practical rulings and details, furuʿ, branch out from this foundation and are considered its subdivisions. Hatchap Part 2, Usul al Din. Is it present in the texts, or is it a scholarly term? In the Quran and the Sunnah, we do not find any explicit text in the Quran or the prophetic traditions that categorizes religious knowledge into usul and furuʿ. However, there are numerous transmitted evidences indicating that Islam is based on essential pillars that must not be compromised, such as the testimony, shahada, tawheed, belief in the Prophet, and the hereafter. Some of these traditions can be found in books like Al-Kafi, Bahar al-Anwar, and other works in which the Imams have outlined the main principles or pillars of religion. Scientific terminology. Based on these transmitted and rational evidences, scholars and theologians have compiled these pillars under the term Usul al Din. The majority of theologians believe that within the Islamic creed, especially among Shia Muslims, there exist 5 fundamental principles that constitute the true faith of every individual. 1. Tawheed. The recognition of God and the affirmation of Him as an eternal primordial essence, with an emphasis on His immutable attributes. 2. Prophethood, the affirmation of God's prophets and everything that has been revealed to them by God. 3. Imamate. This principle, which is also considered one of the fundamentals of the Imamite doctrine, is the affirmation of the imamate of the 12 Imams who succeeded the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This matter is not limited solely to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his final messengership. Rather, it applies to every prophet among the Ulul Azm prophets, those endowed with great resolve who had successors, or what is sometimes referred to in the Quran as the tongue of truth. For instance, the Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, stated in the verse, "And make for me a truthful tongue among the latter ones," 84. And also in the verse, "And we bestowed upon them from our mercy, and we made for them a lofty tongue of truth," 50. Moreover, the term ummah, imams, is applied to those prophets who did not bring forth a new law, but rather served as the inheritors of previous heavenly messages, as mentioned in the verse. "And we made them leaders, guiding by our command, and revealed to them the doing of good deeds, establishing prayer and giving zakat, and they were our devoted worshippers." And also in a sajda, "And we made from among them leaders, guiding by our command, as long as they were patient and certain of our signs." Sajda 24. Full details on this subject can be found in the commentary on the 11th chapter of the section on Imamate. 4. Al-Ma'ad, resurrection. Belief in the day of resurrection, when people will be resurrected after death and receive just recompense based on their deeds. 5. Adl, justice. A principle specific to the Imamite doctrine, as it emphasizes, based on God's attributes, that God never oppresses anyone. The importance of justice and the discussions regarding differences raised by some Sunni scholars on this matter are also explained in detail in the 11th chapter on justice. Therefore, the categorization of the creed into usul and furuʿ is the result of the theologians' systematic effort to organize religious knowledge according to its significance and nature. The principles are those fundamental beliefs that must not be doubted or minimized, whereas the furuʿ are the practical and detailed rulings that stem from these core principles. Why 5 principles, and why are imamate and justice among them? 1. The 3 common principles among all Muslims: Tawheed, prophethood, and the hereafter. Muslims, both Sunnis and Shia, generally agree that these 3 are the fundamental pillars of Islam. Islam is established only through the acceptance of these principles. Any denial or doubt regarding even one of them results in a person's exclusion from the faith. 2. The Imamite doctrinal principles: justice and imamate justice. Justice is considered one of the inherent attributes of God. In the Imamite Shia tradition, this pillar is added as a guarantee that God is just and does not oppress anyone. This emphasis is intended to counter views that suggest that whatever God does, whether it appears oppressive or just, is inherently good. Shia scholars maintain that human reason can clearly discern the goodness of justice and the wrongfulness of oppression, and this understanding must be embedded in a believer's conviction. Imamat. The theologians of the Imamite school believe that imamat is not merely an additional element used by the Shia, but is in fact an extension of prophethood. Every prophet among the Ulul Azm, the resolute prophets, had successors or wasa, or what is sometimes referred to as the tongue of truth, as occasionally mentioned in the Qur'an, whose responsibility was to preserve the divine law and guide the community. For instance, the Qur'an alludes to this concept in verses that mention the role of wasa, or imams. Thus, imamat is established as one of the fundamental principles deriving from prophethood. Some Quranic verses addressing this concept have been discussed earlier in the discourse. Before, the difference between the principles, creed, and the branches principles, creed. The core beliefs form the foundational pillar of the religion. They are the principles upon which a believer's faith is based. These principles constitute the heart of the religion. There is no room for doubt or skepticism regarding them, and the outcomes in the hereafter depend upon them. Branches. The branches refer to the practical and detailed aspects that emanate from the core beliefs. They include the Sharia rulings and jurisprudential applications that prescribe how the foundational principles should be implemented in the daily life of a believer. In other words, the creed, the principles, represents the firm, unalterable essence upon which faith is built, whereas the practical rulings, the branches, serve as a guide for how that essence is manifested in a person's life. Conclusion. It can be said that the term Usul al Din is the product of the scholarly efforts of theologians and Muslim scholars to systematically organize the fundamental pillars of Islam, based on both transmitted, naqli, and rational evidences. These principles consist of those core foundations that must never be doubted, namely Tawheed, prophethood, and the hereafter, in addition to certain distinctive pillars of the Imamite doctrine, namely justice and imamat. Imamat is regarded as an extension of prophethood, since every prophet among the resolute prophets had successors who were entrusted with the duty of preserving the divine law and guiding the community, while justice rests on the absolute attributes of God. The difference between the principles and the branches lies in the fact that the creed, the principles, is the fixed and fundamental core upon which faith is established, whereas the branches are the practical aspects that are implemented once that foundation has been firmly established. In this manner, Islam comprises both a stable doctrinal foundation and a set of practical rules that regulate the life of the believer. You've been with the Sacred Narratives Hub by Mansoureh Shobeyri.